Hello everyone and welcome to the Key Stage 1 Maths Parent Workshop. So today we'll be going through the end of Key Stage expectations, taking a look at the termly overview for both Year 1 and Year 2. We'll be looking at the calculation policy for Key Stage 1 and also how you can help your child at home in both Years 1 and 2. So just thinking about the end of Key Stage 1 expectations, it's really useful to take a look at the link just directly below the comments on the screen. This takes you to the national curriculum. The national curriculum will tell you what is expected of your child by the end of each academic year and really breaks down all of the key areas and what your child needs to know within each area. As an overall statement, children need to be very strong with their number fluency, which means they need to be able to count from 0 to 100 forwards and backwards. They need to understand the role of tens and ones in two-digit numbers. And they should be very secure with the four operations of addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. We also need the children to be able to look at different shapes, both 2D and 3D shapes, and be confident with these, and compare different quantities in length, mass, capacity, time, and money. By the end of Key Stage 1, pupils must be secure with the number bonds to 20 and be very strong with the place value understanding, as I mentioned below, in regards to tens and ones. Of course, in both years 1 and 2, this does differ. So it's, again, really important to go back to the national curriculum and speak to your class teacher so that you know exactly what your child is working on. Here is a general overview of what children will be doing in autumn term in Year 1. Most of this has already been covered. Some aspects are being covered at the moment and are yet to be covered before the Christmas holidays. So in Year 1 at the moment, the children are focusing on subtraction within 10. So this is looking within our number 0 to 10. Children are looking at different ways they can represent subtraction sums. So this may be through number lines, part whole model, and concrete objects too. We'll then be moving on to 2D and 3D shapes before the end of term, and then in spring term, we'll be reinforcing all the skills that they've learned on addition and subtraction within 10, but moving on to bigger numbers, two-digit numbers, so that we'll be looking at numbers within 20. After that unit, we'll be going on to Unit 8, which is numbers to 50, then moving on to measurement around length and height, weight and volume, and then finally in the summer term, focusing on multiplication and division. We'll also be moving on to halves and quarters, position and direction, and then finally numbers to 100. The last two measurement units will be focusing on money and time at the end of Year 1. In Year 2, similarly, children will be focusing on number and focusing on place value. At the moment, they are focusing on addition and subtraction within two-digit numbers, with a particular focus on place value, thinking about tens and ones when they are adding and subtracting two numbers together. And they'll be moving on to properties of shapes. So not just naming 2D and 3D shapes, but thinking about the properties. So referring to the edges, the faces, the vertices, and discussing and making those comparisons between different shapes. In spring, the children in Year 2 will move on to learning about money, multiplication and division, length and height, and then more measurement around mass, capacity, and temperature, and then finally statistics. Summertime will be a lots of consolidation, but the new topic that will be introduced is fractions. So children will not be learning fractions until they get to summer term in Year 2. They will then be focusing on position and direction, building up from the Year 1 learning. Again, they'll be going on to time at the end of the academic year, and then some problem solving right at the end of the academic year. The calculation policy, which will be sent as an attachment, is really for you to understand as parents how we are teaching in Year 1 and Year 2. So a bit different to reception, where we're just using concrete resources and looking at different pictorial representations. In Key Stage 1, the children are looking at concrete objects, but also looking at representations pictorially, and then which is slightly different to reception and of course nursery, we also focus on the abstract method. We call this approach CPA, which stands for concrete, pictorial, and abstract. So the children need to see things physically and in action, acting out, using actual resources, and then seeing it as pictures, and then finally transferring this onto number lines or part whole models or whatever they may be using for the calculation. Here is a short video to show you what that looks like.
Now, hopefully that shows and demonstrates exactly how we move things from concrete object use to pictorially and then transferring that over to abstract. So just thinking about year one and what we are covering in autumn two and the beginning of spring one, we'll be continuing to consolidate our learning within addition within 10. So if you look here, you've got a situation, a number story. Children are using the number of counting to 20 to find out how many people are on the bus. They are counting forwards and then they are representing that on a 10 frame, using that as a representative, and then they move on to doing that on a number line. So again, you see the CPA approach being embedded. Similarly, in subtraction, you have a very similar thing where we would show that using objects, but then you have a pictorial representation where you are crossing out. You show that perhaps using counters or drawing counters, and then you can show that in an abstract way on a number line. 2D and 3D shapes in year one, we will be moving on to that at the end of autumn two, but we will only be focusing in year one on the names of 2D shapes and the names of 3D shapes. You do not need to focus on the properties and understanding that they have how many corners, how many vertices, how many faces or edges they have. That's something that they will develop when they get to year two. In year two, in spring one, we'll be then moving on to addition and subtraction and how they relate to one another. So using the part whole model and thinking of all the different number sentences, just like you have here at the bottom, that they can think of, but really focusing on the relationship between them. So for instance, you have 6 here, 2 and 4 make 6, but also 6 take away 4 equals 2. So children need to be able to see that and see how that looks in different number sentences. And then finally, we will be doing some numbers to 50, which much like the addition within 20 and within 10, we'll be building on that, but we'll be focusing on place value, thinking about how many tens are in 2-digit numbers and how many ones. So for example, here you have 2 tens and 3 ones, which is your number 23. We will also be comparing 2-digit numbers using the greater than and less than symbols. So the children need to be very secure with this and be able to use that language. In year two, children will be developing their skills of addition and they'll be moving on to looking at how those number sentences look with their tens and units, the tens and ones. So previously this was referred to as tens and units. Now in mathematics, we refer to it as tens and ones. So using Deans practically to solve addition and subtraction number sentences, but then also using pictures to help them with that and the part whole model, which is the abstract method. As I said, the same rule applies for subtraction. They can use 10 frames to help them, the part whole model, and then of course, with their number sentence, they may use number lines to support as well. So in these sorts of things, you may want to help your child by thinking of real life context. So you may say to them, I have 16 pencils and I need to buy 12 more so that I have enough
to share at the party. How many more do I need? And that's just one example, but you could do that when you're going out shopping, buying groceries, really getting children to build on that number fluency in real life situations. Multiplication, we will be moving on to multiplication in year 2 in the spring half term, really beginning to get children to think about how we have arrays. So this is called an array, which is a representation and shows 4 different groups of 5 or 5 groups of 5. So in this picture, you have 5 groups of 5, and it's about showing the children how that all looks, and they would be counting in 5s to count the total sum. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. Really getting the children to use their year 1 knowledge and embedding that further in year 2. Similarly, for division in year 2, they'll be thinking about sharing things equally. So we'll be doing it in physical situations where I might have a bag of sweets and I'm sharing that equally between 5 different children to make sure that it's fair. They'll then be doing pictures represent that and then show that on a number line as well. Properties of shapes, as I mentioned earlier, in year 2, that changes from shapes knowledge in year 1 because you are beginning to think about the properties, edges, vertices, and faces, and you're also thinking about language and patterns. So you're developing the understanding of patterns in EYFS, which is nursery and reception, and thinking of how that develops when you are looking at shapes in year 2. That brings us to the end of the workshop for Key Stage 1. I hope that that was all really clear. Documents will be sent out in the email along with this workshop so that you can refer to the calculation policy and also the overview for the year group that your child is in. If you have any further questions, please do not hesitate to contact the office so that they can speak to myself, or you may wish to speak to your class teacher who can give you more information about the needs of your child in specific. Thank you for watching.